like. So first, just general review of like what the different visits are like, what their goals are, what your goals are at each stage. We'd have time for a quick interviewing where Tasha will be interviewing Christy about what it's like to be interviewed or have specific questions about the different stages. And then we'll wrap up the webinar with some quick points about an open Q&A for either John Paul or myself or Tachi if more questions come up in the midst of it to talk more about specific questions. And Christy can also have a moment to speak more about the issue of fit and improving your fit at each stage. So Christy's um, interview credentials, for those of you who don't know her, Dr. Atkinsaya is a professor and associate dean for faculty affairs at Occidental College, which is a small liberal arts college in Los Angeles. She served on over 24 search committees. Thank you for your service, both in her own department, but also in a wide range of others, such as history, classics, sociology, philosophy, music, English, and math. So if you're wondering who might be on your search committee sometimes, it might be a mathematician. We'll find out. She's also chaired the Faculty Search Equity Committee, and under her leadership, they have created a faculty search and hiring guidebook that grounds the search processes in evidence-based best practices. And currently, as Associate Dean, she oversees all faculty searches, both tenure track and non-tenure track, and she meets with all finalists to make it to the campus visit for their final stage interview. Tashi is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Johns Hopkins in Maryland. Tashi, you want to speak a bit briefly about what your research is and what kinds of jobs you're interested in applying for? That'd be really great.
Yeah, so my research is mainly focused on human-animal relationships, companionship in ancient Greek and Latin literature, with a very special interest in ancient veterinary medicine throughout antiquity. And I'm interested in applying to all sorts of academia jobs, from lectureship to tenure track jobs, probably within the specialty of human-animal studies, mainly, I'd say, the Latin side as well, and history of medicine and science.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Christy, you want to take it away with just like an overview of what visits are like from the search end?
Sure, great. Thanks, Misa, for facilitating this workshop, and hello, anyone who's watching this. I We hope that I will give you in a second. I'll give you a sense of the components of a campus visit, but just by way of introduction, we hope that by the end of this workshop, you'll feel comfortable knowing what to expect, so that you can uh, expend all of your energy on presenting your best self. So here we go. So components of a campus visit. Every campus visit will have a research talk, and the research talk very rarely changes. It's almost always the same structure, regardless of the institution. It will be an overview of your research and findings, set within the scholarly conversation with which you're engaging. And then it often will end with you forecasting where you see your research going after the completion of your dissertation in the next 5, 10 years or so. So they'll want to have a sense of what your next project is, or any side projects that you're working on that aren't directly related to your dissertation, or maybe that are just tangential little rabbit holes that you're pursuing as well. They're usually about 45 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A, or they can be an hour with a 20, 30-minute Q&A. Those are usually the structures. You can and you should prepare this in advance of getting invited to campus. This is a great thing to start working on right away, because once you get the invitation, it might just be a couple weeks that you have before you go to campus. So if you have that ready to go, then you can spend your energy on other things that are more variable and more institution dependent. So I highly recommend having a job talk ready to go, practicing it with your friends and colleagues, practicing it with experts who are not necessarily in your specialty, so that you know it's legible, but also at an advanced scholarly, pitched at an advanced scholarly level as well. So research talk is number one. The second thing that is at almost every campus visit, there might be some campus visits that don't do this, but would be a teaching demonstration. This is going to be highly specific. So the institution might say, we want you to teach a class session in X class, and they'll give you the class name, and they want you just to teach a session. Or they might say, we want you to teach a class session in an introductory class to get a sense of how you are with students without any background. Or they might say, we want you to teach a class session in an upper division class. So it's going to be highly varied, and this is what you'll probably spend some time on before the campus visit, as you're preparing for the campus visit. You're already teaching classes. I would strongly recommend keeping a running list of class sessions that go well and activities that have gone well, so that when you're called upon to figure out what your teaching demonstration is going to be, you already have some ideas in a list, and you're not having to, in a stressed situation, try to remember what's worked well. As much as possible, if you can use things you've already done and that you know have gone over well, that's great. At small liberal arts colleges where teaching matters, as much as you can, try to build in some active engagement with the students. They will invite students to these teaching demonstrations. You likely will only have a couple there, like you might have 7 to 10. And you can't assign them reading in advance. So it is the weirdest situation. I'm just going to say it's totally abnormal and unnatural. But there are things you can do. So you can, for instance, set up the class with some background context and or some analytical frames, and then give the students a very small something, whether it's a material object or whether it's a very short excerpt of a text, and then ask them what do they see now that they've been primed with this background information. So you can kind of try to do something, but to get them engaged, that is something that you should try to do if it's possible. It's really hard. Or you can start with, another idea is you can start with a contemporary object that you get students to unpack. I've done this with funerary. I teach a death class, and so we talk about eulogies or we talk about obituaries, and I ask the students, what are the parts of an obituary or what are the parts of a funeral? And then I back into, and they're going to say the things that you expect them to say. So you can kind of anticipate what they're going to do, or they're going to say, and then you can back in and explain how each of those components find their basis in the ancient period or in ancient traditions or ideas. So there are ways that you can kind of get them to, or you can give them a text and say, what do you see? What do you observe? What's interesting about this? And then you kind of unpack or unravel the things, the comments that they give. So there are ways to do it. It's not easy. And it's unnatural, but as much as possible, you can try to get some active engagement in. And I will say, when I did my teaching demo, I did not do this. So you can also still get a job without active engagement. The third component of a campus visit will be interviews with the search committee. And this will either be as a whole group, or this will be one-on-one with each member of the search committee. And this is highly varied across campus visits, across departments, even at the same place. Sometimes the whole search committee will meet you all together, and they'll ask more in-depth questions that you saw in the semifinalist interviews. So if you're doing a semifinalist interview, remember right after you do it to write down all of the questions that they asked you, or if it's on Zoom, record it yourself, record the interview, you can't record. You'd have to do a screen grab, but so that you have the questions that they asked you, and you know kind of what areas they're looking for in a new hire. Those questions will give you an indication. I'll say another tip about these interview situations is reread the job ad, because the job ad should be very explicit about what they're looking for. You should be able to tease out the evaluation criteria. So if they say in the job ad, we're looking for someone who we don't really care what, it's an open area of expertise, but they should be able to teach courses that have community engaged learning, or they should be able to do this or that. You likely applied to a lot of jobs and you may not remember what the job ad was asking for. So definitely go back and reread that job ad and think about the questions that they asked you in the semifinalist interview. That will give you hints as to the ways in which they're evaluating you and how you should frame your responses to make yourself fit those things that they're looking for. And if they don't, if you don't have any idea, you should ask, what are you looking for? What would be really helpful for you in a new hire? Because I think it's, you don't always know from the job. I have some other tips also that I have about fit, but I'll wait for those later. But you might also meet one-on-one. So there are some search committees who forego the group meeting and just meet one-on-one with each member of the search committee. Sometimes they will be recruiting you at the same time. So sometimes they will be assigned to, I'm going to be the person who talks about sabbaticals and research funds and this kind of stuff. And I'm going to be the person who talks about the housing program and the childcare, So sometimes that's the way that they set up um, they assign who does what in those one-on-one interviews. And then the other thing I would say is oftentimes you'll have an external member, so a search committee member who's not a part of the department. And if they are designated as the DEIJ person, be prepared for DEIJ questions. Be prepared for questions about how do you support students from underrepresented backgrounds? How do you get underrepresented material into your classes? Things like that. Be prepared for those questions as well. So other parts of the campus visit, you'll have also a meeting with the dean or the provost oftentimes. Sometimes it's the associate dean for faculty affairs. Sometimes you'll have both meetings with both of them. And then I would say about half campus visits have a meeting with the president, half don't. So that is kind of a variability across institutions. And oftentimes it's just a matter of, is the president available to meet with a bunch of different finalists? Usually you will have a meeting with the dean or the provost, and oftentimes with an associate dean as well. You will have a meeting with students almost always. Sometimes this is over lunch. I have lots of advice on that meeting if we want to spend some time talking about that later. And then you'll have dinner with search committee members, maybe everyone, maybe just a handful of search committee members. I can talk about that too. And then there's a handful of components that I see sometimes, but not always. So sometimes there's a campus tour. And that's usually just meant to be a breather, a time for you to have some downtime. Sometimes there's an exit interview with the search committee chair at the very end. That's meant to be a, how did the visit go? Do you have any lingering questions? Telling you the timeline for deliberation and notification, and just kind of being a way to wrap up the campus visit. That's a great time to express your interest in the job. So you're going to be really tired, but be very nice about how well organized the visit was, and that you're very interested in the job. That's a good thing to say at that. It's because that's your last impression. And it's always something that comes up in deliberation is, oh, they were so nice at the end and they said that we were great, so make a good final impression. And then there should be lots of breaks built in. There may not be, but there should be if it's organized well. If there are not breaks built in, you should feel free when you need to say, I need to use the restroom. And you should also uh, maybe have some candy or energy bars in your bag so that you can scarf them down if you need just a little sugar boost or you need some food if they don't give you breaks. If you have any accommodations, if you need to, for instance, pump, that is something to tell the administrative assistant who sends you the schedule well in advance so that they work that into the schedule. It's better to do that before the schedule gets to you. The schedule should get sent to you at least a couple days before your visit, ideally at least a week before. But give them that information before you get the schedule so that they can work it into the schedule, and be very clear about what you need. So I need this every 3 hours. Search committees are legally obligated to give you appropriate accommodations. So don't feel at all shy about asking. Also, make known your dietary preferences and restrictions in advance too. That helps when they're thinking of what restaurant to take you to. If you have specific dietary restrictions and they pick a restaurant that doesn't work, then they have to find another one. So it's better to give them that information in advance than to wait until you have the schedule. So there's lots of things that I could say about each of those components, and so we can talk more about that later if you're interested. But I think that's an overview. Misa, was there anything, Misa just did a recent campus visit. Was there anything that was part of your campus visit that was different?
I think that hit all of the main points. The main difference was that my exit interview was done with the chair and not the search committee. So I think
Ah,
having
okay.
sometimes I start meeting with the chair themselves, where and she is the one to go over like the nuts and bolts of this is what the job will entail on a day-to-day basis, which I
Great.
think would change depending on department size.
Yeah.
Also, a word of advice I got from my advisor is that do a head count of who shows up to your events, like your job talk or your teaching demo. If all or almost all of the department shows up, except for people who are on leave, that's a good sign they're interested and that they are a united front. If half the department is
Mm.
boycotting you, then there might be some internal divisions about the search itself.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice. Yeah. Yeah, and you can kind of suss that out in terms of the questions they ask you as well. So if and the way that the discussion goes after the research talk, yeah, great advice. That's great advice.
I think this is also a good point to segue into like Tashi's specific interview questions about
Right.
just anything you just heard, anything you prepared, and that you want to talk about in more detail.
Yeah, thank you so much. I guess I'll start with my first question, which is kind of over the general visit. What are your tips for calming your nerves down during the visit?
Yeah. I think it would help me to be reminded that everyone who's at a campus visit is qualified for the job. This is you already have the qualifications, and in fact, they have chosen you as their top three out of hundreds of applications. So you should feel very confident in yourself, that you are qualified. Um, you should you should get the job. And so I would just remind yourself of that. The other advice I have, and I see this all the time, is that there are campus visit finalists who comport themselves as people who understand themselves to be meritorious of the job, and then those that understand themselves to be graduate students who are looking to move up to the next level. Um, and I would strongly, strongly, strongly suggest you comport yourself in the former way. So understand yourself, and there's ways to do this just mentally. Um, understand yourself to be someone who, even if you haven't been instructor of record, you most likely have been teaching as a TA. And so you're a person who knows what it's like to lead a classroom, who knows what it's like to lead a discussion, to be the person mentoring students. It doesn't really matter if you haven't been instructor of record or not. If you have, great. But uh, I would lean into that, that you know what it's like, and that the issues that you have experienced are the same issues that seasoned senior professors still experience. Like we all still are encountering the students who use AI or who cheat, the students who come to class and then they leave 10 minutes later to go to the bathroom and you're like, what is going on? The students who, like, teaching a class that has students with varied backgrounds, some that are majors or minors and others that have never taken a class in your department before, um, those that have, gone to private school versus those that have gone to less resourced schools. Like, so I would comport yourself as someone who's like, this is what's worked really well for me. Um, and here's why I think it has worked really well. I'm still trying to figure out these other things that, and it puts you on par with the search committee, because what they're going to do is they're going to say, oh yeah, that's a real hassle for me too, or here's something that I've tried, and it makes you colleagues already. So really comport yourself as a colleague in this enterprise of teaching, and then comport yourself as a colleague in terms of scholarship too. Almost, almost certainly, you are dedicating more time to your research than the people who are hiring you. It just, your life just gets busier as you get a tenure track job, and the share of time that you have for research shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And so you are, the way you think, the amount of time you can dedicate to conducting research is most certainly more than most of the people that are on your search committee. So you should comport yourself in that way. Like, I'm doing this amazing research and engaging with these scholarly conversations, and this is what I want to do next. And that will necessarily be inspiring to the people who are itching to have more research time. So uh, I think you're at an advantage, and seeing yourself as, I'm the grad student who wants to get to this professor job, um, is actually not helpful, because you're actually in a better position than they are in some ways. In terms of the research time that you have. So I would say that kind of comportment. And then once you feel that confidence and act, some of this is just fake it till you make it, right? You act that confident, then they regard you as a colleague as well. And it really does give you a leg up. Use first names. Again, that's about treating them as colleagues and not as professors, and you as the grad student. So use first names. Um, don't even ask, just use first names. um, and I think that's what I would say. Misa, would you say anything else about calming nerves?
Two things. So for me, the manifestation of the grad student mentality first was defensive post-comps mode, where I felt like my first iteration of the job talk, I felt like I had to prove that I had done the reading, that I knew the field. And I was told to take that out, take the majority of my references out, and have them on like a little bibliography printout that could give the committee so they could read as they're listening to my job talk. But my talk should be focused on my research because we're cutting edge, which is a really good way
Yeah.
of having both proof that I've done the reading, which I'm always still afraid of, and also the time to focus on our own research and presenting ourselves as scholars on part of the rest, which was really, really helpful. And the second thing I did, which might be over preparation, but it was helpful for me, was I had an analog notebook and a dossier for every person I was meeting during the visit, what their research was, how their research tied to mine, and specific questions I wanted to ask each person when I wanted to meet them, and some questions, I'm so sorry, overlaps, and some questions were specific to that particular part of the day. And I think that just helped. Just having a script to go off was really helpful for just not panicking.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the more prepared you can feel, the more confident you'll be, and the more you can actually be a little more flexible and read the room. And yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think what you said about you're not proving that you're a scholar. You are a scholar. That's it. Full stop. Um, your goal in the research talk is to be interesting and cool. You want to stimulate. You don't want to prove that you're a scholar. Yeah, you are. So yeah, be interesting and cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are both great advice. I really appreciate also it's like a change in perspective
Mhm.
of the process. I guess we'll go to my next question, which is we're kind of jumping to a little more about the dean slash provost slash possibly president interview. What kinds of questions do they ask? Because this is something that I've only recently learned about as part of the interview process.
Yeah. So just to back up in terms of authorization. So depending on the institution, there are different people who authorize the hires. So some institutions, there's a search committee that's made up of the department or department members if it's a big department, and then sometimes an external member. Um, and they run the search and they make the decision. So sometimes the decision lies there. It's not always, though, like very rarely. And then sometimes they make a recommendation to the dean of the college or the provost, and the provost and dean makes the decision. And so and then sometimes the president makes the decision. So uh, you won't know, and it might be kind of weird to ask who makes the decision. um, so I think if you ever have a question of like what's most likely, feel free to ask some of us who already have jobs, and we can tell you how it works at our institution. Because um, yeah. So that's to say the dean meeting and the president meeting are usually what you're trying to do is not be a total weirdo that raises a red flag that makes them question a recommendation of the search committee. So, I mean, this would have to be bad. You would have to say something racist. You would have to say, I don't want to be at a research institution if that's where you're interviewing. You know what I mean? You'd have to say something that was a serious red flag. So don't stress too much about these meetings. It is appropriate to ask the search committee chair, what should I expect of these meetings? Because they will likely know. Most of the time, what it's going to be is they're going to ask general questions. So tell me about your research. Tell me about the kinds of classes that you could teach. Um, and then sometimes what they do is they do some of the recruiting. So at my institution, our president is the like rah rah Occidental College, and we'll talk about how great Oxy is. Our dean, in the dean's meeting, she talks about benefits. So she talks about research funds, all the different kinds of research funds that we have, sabbatical, some benefits, some child development center, some things like that. So she does some like recruiting as well as very mild getting to know you. But these are pretty low stakes meetings in terms of the bar you're trying to cross is don't screw up. Not I need them to love me to get the job. Um, uh, so yeah, I think that's what I would say. Oh, you might also meet with an associate dean, and there you can kind of figure out what they're going to be talking to you about by going to their dean profile and see what their portfolio is. So for instance, we have an associate dean who's in charge of all of our first year learning, our first year courses, and our general education. So in his meeting, he asks about um, which general education requirements would your courses fulfill? And let me tell you about our first year program, our first year course program. The associate deans at my institution have no say. Nobody asks us. what our opinions are of the candidates. We're all recruitment. Um, so even though some of our titles are higher than the department members, we have no say and they have all the say. So you should really don't go by title, and weight of decision making. Misa, did you meet with Dean President?
I met with the dean and the provost at the same time, which was interesting.
Oh,
Oh,
I because like the way they explained it was that the dean could answer questions about the college, the pros could answer questions about the university, and there was a sense of recruitment on both ends. And it was definitely the most opaque part of the day, but like Chrissy said, it's very, very low stakes.
yeah. And that those are good questions to have ready to ask them. Frankly, even if you know the answers already, tell me about the sabbatical schedule. Tell me about research funds. Tell me about these different kinds of benefits. Those are always great questions to ask. Or tell me how recent newly hired faculty have fared recently. Are there new faculty orientation programs that I will be a part of? These are all questions you could ask them. Again, even if you somebody else has already told you the answers, nobody's comparing notes of how those conversations go.
I'd even say, especially if you know the answers already, because depending on the institution you go to, it might be worth seeing the department and admin have different approaches to situations. Because, for
Yeah,
example, I interviewed in Texas. I asked about academic freedom at both levels. And it's nice to see they're on the same page about that. And that might be an issue
that's
for some of the institutions.
yeah, great point.
yeah, thank you so much. I think my last question is let me just read it off. During the interview, would it be okay to bring a piece of paper to jot down main points you want to cover in an answer? Is this an okay strategy to use in any aspect, any different interviews?
Yeah, I think it's a great strategy. It's a great strategy for a couple of reasons. One, you make sure you're understanding the question. I'm the person who like gets really excited about questions, and so somebody's asking me a question, and I'm only listening to the first half and thinking that they're asking something that they're not, just because that's my nature. So it's a great way to make sure you're understanding the question. And as you're writing it down, you can say, so I understand like your question is about this thing, you know. Um, uh, it also buys you a little time to think. It buys you a little time to write, Tashi, I think this is such a good idea. Like I want to make points A, B, and C. So I'm going to write one word for A, B, and C to make sure I don't lose track of B and C while I'm answering. Well, I'm giving the response of A, right? So great idea. I actually see it a lot. So as Misa said, I meet with all campus finalists for every search at Oxy, and it's very common that they're writing down the questions. Uh, it's also it's also good if you don't know how to answer something, or you're like, or you need to like think about it a little bit. You can say, "Oh, that's a great question. My initial response would be this." But let me think about it more. And if you have it written down, when you send a follow-up email, we should talk about that too, post-visit follow-up emails. Uh, um, you can always say, and you know, I thought that I've been thinking more about the question that you asked, blah blah blah, and here are some additional thoughts that I have about that. So yeah, totally normal and also a great practice.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to hear more about the follow-up email.
Yeah, Misa, would you add anything to that question though before?
My notebook was my best friend for that visit. It also, it's so handy to have as a resource to come back to when you're coming down from the adrenaline high and the exhaustion, and you just have a record of the visit to take notes for that previous visit and remember, and also to prepare for later visits, just like start a running list of questions you've answered before, which is really helpful. We do have
Yeah,
about, yeah, sorry, go for it, Christy.
can I say in terms of the post visit communication, I will say so on the other end of it, I'm not a big fan of getting an email from candidates, but I will say that's just me, and I know that that's a me thing, but it is pretty obligatory. And if you don't do it, some search committee members read into it, so you kind of have to do it. So I would make it short. I would make it brief. I would be nice. I would just say, it was so lovely to meet you. You can do it as an entire search committee. So the entire search committee, it was so lovely to meet you. Thank you for hosting me. Um, I would. Um, I would I would include the administrative assistant or the department services coordinator that did all of the logistical work. I would say I just want to thank whoever that person, name that person, include them in the email, whoever they were, for making such terrific arrangements. And I mean, be really nice to that person, because sometimes that person's opinion actually matters far more than the dean or the president. They are often the heart of departments. So be very nice to them during the visit. Be very nice to them as you're planning the visit, and then thank them. I would thank them also during the research talk as well. Um, I would thank the search committee for their warm welcome, and but you kind of have to do it. So I would, quick thank you. And then if there was any of that follow up, I've thought a little bit more about this question that you asked. I would maybe send that as a side email to just that person. Um, but if you're sparing in your words, um, then people like me who don't really like those emails, I don't really care, But if it's like a really long email that asks me a bunch of questions, you're making me work, and I don't want to work after after an interview. So really nice, brief little thanks so much. And here's a thing that I thought, and thanks for yeah.
Also,
Did you do?
be specific while you're being briefed too, like not a boilerplate email. Like name one. This is advice I got. Like talk about one thing that was really nice they did for you, or that you talked about over dinner. Not or like a question you really enjoy. Just say like, I am not copying and pasting this to every single visit I get. I actually care about you. Please give me a job.
That's yeah.
So we've got about 10 minutes left. We're going up until 11:50 or 50 past the hour for some East Coast people. For both Tashi or John Paul, at this point, are there particular questions that you've thought of or that came up while we were having this overview? Please excuse my dog, he's being very grumbly. Okay. In that case, if people are still thinking of questions, Christy, I know you had some extra points about fit you wanted to bring up earlier, which I think would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I do. So I think one of the things, if you haven't had a job before, um, you tend to think about a tenure track job only as teaching and research. And so you're trying to impress on those two platforms. Um, but it's really helpful to put yourself in the position of the search committee, the members of the department, and think about, where are their pressure points? Where are they feeling the most pain? And how can you situate yourself as alleviating some of that pain or addressing some of those pressure points? And I can think of two things that whenever a candidate talks about these two things, they immediately get elevated in my estimation of them. So one of them is enrollments. And this used to be the case in some institutions and not others, but now it's kind of the case everywhere, that every humanities department is really paying a lot of attention to enrollments. So the more you can talk about the courses that you will offer as attracting students, and very particular students, the so if you can say, I'm teaching a history of medicine class that will attract students in the sciences, there are always lots of science students. So they will immediately be like, oh great, that will help our enrollments. Or I can teach these classes that will fulfill the gen ed requirements at your institution, that you are telling them, I have a plan for how I can help you address this pressure point of enrollments, and it will immediately make you more attractive. And then the other thing that is a pain point is departmental service or college-wide service. So a lot of times when candidates come to campus and we talk about, it would be really great, to have your help with service. What they often will recommend is, oh yeah, I've organized a graduate student conference, or I've brought speakers, or I can organize a workshop or something like that. What you're doing is which is great, like do all those things. But what you're doing is adding more work that you are taking on, as opposed to taking on work that exists before you even get there. So what you want to do is say things like, I haven't had much experience with assessment, but I would be really interested to help with departmental assessment, which is required for accreditation. So you are saying, I will do this dreaded thing that none of you want to do, and they will immediately love you. If you say, I don't know who does your website or your social media, but that's something that I could take on. Again, things that professors, especially senior professors who are technophobic, do not want to have anything to do with. Or I don't know if you all need help with organizing the student majors and minors and building community among those students. That also is helpful with enrollments as well, if you get a kind of sexy major minor community. So thinking in terms of what are their needs and their pressure points that are not fun, not the fun things. Organizing a conference is super fun. I wish I could do that all the time, but like I'm busy doing like the really scut work. If you say you're willing to do some of that and you offer it, not just say I'll do it when they ask you, you will immediately be seen again as a colleague and not as a grad student, with an awareness of what the job entails. And there's just a feeling. I can't describe the feeling. As a search committee member, when a candidate says something, I just like take a breath of relief that I get some help on the not enjoyable parts of the job. And you want that feeling to be associated with you. So I would say that is my biggest advice. The other piece of advice I already talked about with fit was reread the job ad, think about the semifinalist questions that they asked you. They should be giving you hints as to how they're evaluating you, and it should be explicit in the job ad, hopefully, and feel free to ask those questions.
Two really brief points about the service and how you can like sell yourself on service more before like two last points you also promised earlier, Christy. We don't have a lot of experience as graduate students for committee work. So Remedy in York is going to be really, really helpful. But also like finding a way to talk about, for me, the skills I can translate from group projects at a graduate level onto like the community level was more helpful, I thought, than just saying I have experience directly with assessment, because obviously I don't. But I've experience working with other people in X, Y, and Z contexts. I'm able to diffuse conflicts. I'm able to initiate a project without constant oversight. Here's proof of that. And translating the skills up to this next level, I think, is more effective and concrete.
Absolutely. Assessment really is about figuring out what the thing you're going to assess is, and then herding cats, like all of the faculty to give you their component that you synthesize and put together and work with the assessment or accreditation person to make it pretty into the report that they need. And those are skills you absolutely have if you have organized a conference or if you've done group work, or, so um, yeah, learning something. This is what's needed. I've learned this quickly in order to do this task that, you know. But again, you don't even need the experience. Your willingness alone to do assessment is sufficient.
Are there any further questions? Because I have a question at this point.
Yeah, and then I have one for you, Lisa. So
Okay.
you go first.
Okay. So, Christy, you left us a teaser earlier, but you had lots of advice for how to run the meeting with the students of the department and meetings with the individual committee members. So you also, do you all mind staying for just like a little bit overtime to talk about this?
Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, so with students, is that what you said?
Yes, with the students and with the individual committee members, like for these
Oh,
one-on-one
right.
meetings, these more personable meetings, what's at stake here? What do you
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. I was actually going to ask you the question about the students. Yeah, so I would say with the students, again, perspective shifting thing, just remember they're really nervous. I do a lot of prep with the student committees, and I help them articulate what questions are you going to ask that are not illegal, that are appropriate. Um, but they're so nervous because they're interviewing someone who is their superior, without having one of their professors in the room. So it's a very, they're nervous. And so I would go into those meetings as trying to put them at ease and making them feel smart and you being interested in them. So, without being their buddy. You don't want to be their buddy and just talk about football or baseball or whatever, you know. So I would ask them, what courses have you enjoyed the most, or what, and why? Or if they're seniors, what research are you conducting for your senior thesis? And then asking them follow-up questions about that and being really interested in that. What do they hope for in a new hire? What do they think, are really important, features of this new person that they hire? And then I would also talk to them about classes that you could teach, and I would frame it not as this is a list of classes I could teach, but frame it rather as you're seeking their expertise because they're experts as students. I have this class that I teach. How do you think this would go over well here? You know, asking them for their input and making them feel, comfortable and confident and like experts when they're already feeling kind of vulnerable. Did you have a meeting with students, Misa?
I had a meeting with graduate students and I had a one-on-one with one undergraduate. I think it definitely putting them at ease is really helpful and asking both groups about if they have any particularly favorite classes or professors as an opening question. Because if they can't name a favorite professor, that's probably something's off in the department. But if they're just immediately like, I love so and so, here's why, or I'm close with X, Y, and Z, and it's a really good department community going on. For the meeting with graduate students, I think this is one of the cases where being ABD like us can be a real strength because I was grilled in a very polite way about what I would do to get them ready for the job market and what kind of course, what kind of schools I could prepare them for, and like what my thoughts were on professional development were. And I was able to bring up the fact that I'm like you guys, I know what the terror of the market right now is in a way that a lot of professors who are established don't. I think that
Yeah,
definitely hit the chord. So you still don't want to be buddy buddy with them, but there is a place where you can level like our relative inexperience as a strength with that particular group of people.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was going to be my question to you, was how you handled the student visit.
Right.
Yeah, in terms of the one-on-ones with the search committee members, I would let them take the lead. I love Misa's suggestion of having a notebook with looking up each of their research and having pre-prepared questions for each of them. Um, sometimes I, sometimes it can feel a little stilted if you're trying to shoehorn your responses into connections with with them. So like read the room about whether that's appropriate or not, but I love the idea of being prepared so that you have it there in case you need it, and having questions that you can ask each of them, or even general questions that you can ask any of them if there's a silence.
I think that list of like pinch hitter questions is really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So we are just a minute over time. Are there any last questions or comments people have? Okay, if not, thank you all. I know it's just past the New Year's geopolitics is doing its usual thing right now, so we're all very stressed. Thank you all for coming still. This will be, if you're watching this, it has been posted to either YouTube or our website. And just again, for Christy and Tashi, thank you so much for taking your time on this Tuesday. It's Tuesday.
Thank you.